First up today, presenting on challenges with actively managing the display of queue warning messages is Reno Giordano. Reno is Vice President, Transportation Operations at WSP, and he will be providing an overview about why this is an emerging topic among TMSs. Hand it over to you, Reno.
All right, thank you, Matt. Let's move to the next slide and dive right into why actively managing the display of queue warning messages is an important emerging topic. So first, queuing conditions on freeway facilities present significant safety concerns. There's the increased potential for rear-end crashes and the introduction of shock waves that disrupt traffic flow upstream of a queue. The queues themselves can be recurring or non-recurring. Causes of recurring queues can include things like bottleneck or roadway geometry deficiencies, or such as the heavily used off-ramps, particularly when a queue spills back onto the main line, merge areas with heavy on-ramp traffic volumes, lane drops or the reduction in number of lanes on a freeway. And non-recurring queues, of course, can be caused by crashes or work zones on a temporary basis, reduction in roadway capacity and travel speed due to a work zone. So what is one way we can deal with that? In response, traffic management systems can provide warning messages to alert vehicles before they encounter the unexpected or unstable traffic flow conditions from that queue. Drivers are less likely to need to take abrupt action like hard braking, abrupt lane changes, even running off the road to prevent a rear-end crash. But to capitalize on these safety benefits of TMSs displaying queue warning messages, what do we need to know about the role of TMSs and traffic management center operations staff? We'll want to look at things like the actions, decisions, information needs, capabilities, and resources that TMSs and operators may need to support using queue warning messages on freeways. So let's explore that further. Next slide. So the capabilities needed for a TMS to display warning messages associated with areas of unstable traffic flow can include TMS assets to monitor the travel conditions, typically including sensors to measure speeds and/or vehicle flows at multiple points upstream of the potential bottleneck location. For example, as you approach a work zone lane closure. And typical data sources for this are loop detectors or microwave vehicle detection equipment. Another option is probe data, for example, from toll tags or third-party vehicle probes, or even crowdsourced data can supplement or substitute for those fixed roadway or roadside sensor data sources. Another option is connected vehicle data, but that's not, as we found, regularly being used for the display of queue warning messages because of limited CVs on the roadway currently, but we should make a note of that as an option. In addition to the traffic sensors, we need TMS software to detect the presence of the queue and then select an appropriate warning message. Message selection would be based on software's logic or algorithm and may require operator approval and ultimate posting to the third element that's required, changeable message signs or portable changeable message signs to provide the warning message itself to the drivers of approaching vehicles. Yeah, go ahead. We can move to the next slide. So diving a little further into the detail, how the TMS functions to display those queue warning messages using the TMS assets I just described. First, data is collected by the traffic sensors to determine the location of a potentially changing location of the back of the queue or BOQ, the back of the queue of stopped vehicles, and potentially the location of unstable traffic flow. So in the little diagram on the slide, that's shown in the numbered circles as you proceed backward from the queue origin, which in the diagram is a taper or a lane drop there. So then the sensors capture vehicle speeds and or lane occupancy at defined locations upstream. Um, Typically, the required spacing is about 1/2 to 1 mile, with potentially closer spacing near the queue generation point, if that's known. For example, in the case of a recurring bottleneck or a ramp that causes the queue at a specific location. Um, then data is averaged over defined time intervals, for example, 1 minute, and then compared against predefined thresholds that would warrant the posting of a warning message. An algorithm determines when to post those messages, where and on what signs to post them, and then what they should say. A couple common examples there on the slide are suggested: slow traffic X miles or slow traffic ahead, displayed when speeds begin to drop or congestion builds, and the distance from the back of the queue is sufficient for that kind of cautionary message. Or as conditions worsen, we can display a stopped traffic X miles or stop traffic ahead when speeds fall below a specific threshold and the congestion that's built up is significant enough to warrant that more urgent message. Next slide. So let's look at the benefits of TMS's displaying queue warning messages now. Agencies have really found the benefits to be all around safety, of course. They identify reductions in crashes, reductions in the severity of crashes, and crash cost savings as the benefits. Agencies also often use this approach in combination with other strategies that result in aggregate benefits. So the display of queue warning messages is often one of several strategies that improve safety and mobility associated with work zones, for example. It's also one of several traffic management operational strategies, also including things like lane use control, hard shoulder running, variable speed limits, all in an effort to manage a corridor and improve safety and mobility. So as a specific example, queue warning messages are sometimes used with variable speed limits. The queue warning messages may complement them and help explain why speeds are being reduced. And the combination of the two result in safety and mobility benefits from smoother traffic flow and smaller speed differentials. Overall, we have to observe, though, that quantified benefits are relatively limited, but this is likely largely because the display of queue warning messages is actually a relatively inexpensive add-on among these other strategies. And perhaps there hasn't been a great effort to quantify those benefits because it is a cost-effective solution to implement. Nonetheless, so next slide, we do have a few examples of some quantified benefits. I won't spend a lot of time on this table because we'll actually hear a little bit later from Minnesota DOT and Pennsylvania DOT, and they can provide better detail about their efforts. But on the slide, we've got some examples of fairly significant reductions in crashes and injuries due to the application of TMSs displaying queue warning messages. That third example there from Texas was a long-range widening project along I-35, and they measured a significant reduction in crashes with and without the use of queue warning messages during that effort, and even quantified the cost savings, crash cost savings over the construction duration. So pretty significant results there. Next slide. So I'll shift a little bit and talk about each of these key considerations next. So looking a little further into the integration with traffic management systems and sources of data, what are some implications for TMC staff? talk about the selection of queue warning messages a little, prioritizing the posting of queue warning messages on signs, and integration with other operational strategies and other messages to manage traffic. Next slide. So when integrating queue warning messages with TMSs, there's several important considerations to work through. First, an agency should determine the extent of the display of queue warning messages, the extent that the display of the messages use elements of an existing TMS. So to do that, an agency should consider what coverage and TMS assets are needed to monitor traffic conditions. Additional traffic sensors beyond what's existing may be needed to ensure adequate granularity of the data and to determine queue characteristics. For example, lane by lane data may be important when speed characteristics vary across the roadway, which is a common characteristic at high volume interchanges or freeway exit ramps, for example. Part of determining what assets are needed to monitor traffic conditions is identifying the type and source of data. So we talked about those sources a little earlier: roadside sensors, probe or third-party data, CV data. And a common decision might be determining whether the TMS needs to augment physical sensor data with third-party traffic data, or even to operate just using third-party data. That's an option as well. And of course, assets to display the messages are also necessary, so agencies should determine whether permanent or portable CMSs are available and where they might need additional ones located to display the messages at the appropriate locations. And then so with the physical elements and data sources addressed, an agency would then need to determine the analytic requirements to display queue warning messages. This includes algorithms to analyze traffic conditions, detect the queue, select the appropriate message, and potentially requiring new software to manage that process. Then they think about business rules that should sit behind all that as well. They should be established to address issues of use criteria. For example, will the display of queue warning messages occur 24/7, or perhaps only during congested conditions, if known, or even tied to seasonal variation in roadway use? And then look at business rules as well tied to the role of the TMC operators themselves in terms of functions like supervision and message display override when that might be necessary. So next slide. Speaking of TMC operators, what are the implications for those kinds of staff? Good news there, I guess. TMS's displaying queue warning messages does not significantly affect TMC staffing levels or duties beyond baseline operations, because queue warning messages typically function with a high degree of automation. A TMC operator typically performs a supervisory role as a part of their regular duties to monitor the roadway system for incidents, for congestion, other events. The operator may confirm queue conditions to ensure a trigger is not a false positive, and to confirm posting of the queue message or override the message if a more urgent or alternative event needs to be communicated. So there is that role. In general, increased TMC operator staffing levels are unlikely to be needed, given the modest increment beyond regular duties that queue warning presents. And then should consider, though, when the display of queue warning messages is used in conjunction with other traffic management strategies, there may be the need for additional TMC staff, but this really reflects the integrated nature of managing a corridor using multiple strategies, again, such as lane use control, part-time shoulder use, variable speed limits, along with the queue warning. So there could be some staff implications when you move to that level of broader active management strategy application. Looking beyond TMC operators themselves, though, we have found if an agency is regularly deploying queue warning messages in work zones, staff dedicated to work zone planning, and maybe contractor support might be needed to integrate the equipment into an agency's TMS and TMC. So there is that consideration in the scenario of significant work zone application. Next slide. For selecting particular messages, queue warning message display triggers and logic are based on defined speed thresholds. So typically free flow conditions, low traffic conditions, and stopped traffic conditions. So generally all TMSs follow some variation of comparing freeway free flow speeds, so that's V, uh, to two speed thresholds. V1 for slow traffic, shown there on the slide, and V2 for stopped traffic. Agencies typically set V1 to be about 40 or 45 miles an hour, and then V2 to be between 20 and 35 miles per hour. So we've got a couple of examples in the table on the slide. So in the case of free flow conditions, when V is greater than that first threshold of V1, everything's moving along pretty nicely. The Before a queue forms, assuming that's going to happen, the default message on the CMS could be, whatever you want to display for free flow conditions, including nothing. So that's an option. After a queue in some conditions, so post queue, you may use the CMS for a short duration to display a post queue message, something like traffic delays possible for up to 5 minutes or X minutes. So that's sort of the use case in the free flow condition. As a queue starts to form and we've got slow traffic conditions, our speed V falls between the upper and lower threshold. The logic would suggest to display a slow traffic message, again, something like slow traffic X miles or slow traffic ahead. If you've got multiple CMSs upstream of the queue, something close to the queue origin might display a message like congestion X miles, whereas further away, it's more caution, reduced speed for drivers anticipating the formation of a queue downstream. On the stop traffic message side, when the speed drops below that lower threshold, typical message display there would be stop traffic X miles or stop traffic ahead. And again, maybe some distinction depending on how close you are to the origin in terms of what's displayed on the CMS. Something close to the origin would say stop traffic ahead, whereas further away it would be slightly less urgent, be prepared to stop. Those are common messages in those basic scenarios. A little bit about message prioritization. Generally, a queue warning message should be displayed unless there is a higher priority, such as for an incident or crash. So not too much probably is considered to be higher priority. Queue warning message would be pretty well up there. As a comparison, a queue warning message priority could be on par with something like an adverse weather notification. Just as a specific example, on its US 23 Flex route, which has multiple active traffic management strategies, Michigan DOT gives queue warning messages the highest priority among messages that it posts on small CMSs mounted on periodic overhead gantries. So they view it as a significant priority. Next slide. Touched on this a bit already, but just to reiterate, queue warning messages are often incorporated into TMSs that more broadly or holistically manage recurring and non-recurring congestion dynamically based on prevailing and predicted traffic conditions. So integrated strategies can include dynamic lane use control, part-time shoulder use, variable speed limits, ramp metering. These individual strategies generally share the same TMS elements, which include vehicle traffic detection equipment, changeable message signs, and communication equipment. Queue warning messages are integrated with these strategies through an agency's TMS operating system and share similar functions, including collecting and using same or similar data, relying on algorithms to perform their functions, requiring similar activities of operators, and displaying messages as part of their function. So again, the queue warning message or the display of queue warning messages can often be one part of the broader corridor management strategy that a TMS is already equipped to function. Next slide. Wrap up here with some lessons learned from all of this. So recent survey of practice that informed or supported this TMC pooled fund study project and this close examination of queue warning messages revealed that many state DOTs have successfully deployed the use of queue warning messages along freeway corridors and in work zones. So kind of a baseline obvious finding there. For those in work zones, some may function independently of an agency's TMC and do not integrate with the TMS. So in some cases, these systems may connect to existing changeable message signs, but are automated through local control. But there are also good examples of agencies that use components of an existing TMS and integrate with the TMC for those work zone applications. Typically, these uses of queue warning messages are enabled by additional software incorporated into the TMS. Displaying queue warning messages does not add significant cost to managing and operating TMSs, which use existing assets to display the queue warning messages on permanent and portable CMS. New equipment may be necessary when sensor coverage is insufficient for the message displayed decision-making algorithm, or if additional CMS are needed at critical locations upstream of the queue to warn drivers at appropriate junctures. Most common sources of data to detect unstable traffic flow or queues are sensors, roadside sensors, third-party sources, or crowdsourced data, for example, from mobile device applications. The display of queue warning messages typically does not increase the number of operators managing and operating a TMS. Displaying queue warning messages is highly automated, where operators generally performing a supervisory role as part of their regular duties to monitor the roadway system. The level of operator focus may increase with the volume of queue warning deployments, especially if they are regularly used for work zones. Generally, though, the demands on a TMC operator's time do not warrant an increase in staffing. In the case of select work zones, an agency may need staff or contractor support to integrate field devices deployed to monitor traffic conditions and display messages into an agency's TMS to monitor traffic conditions. And then last, the display of queue warning messages enhances the effectiveness of other operational strategies by providing a rationale related to downstream traffic conditions. So when downstream traffic conditions are slowed or stopped, it can lend credence to the application of a variable speed limit and why that's being implemented. So that's wraps up our lessons learned and challenges and overview section. I'll hand it back to Alex.